Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the CPEC and the statements coming from the United States of America, in particular from Alice Wells, regarding the CPEC, where they have actually said that it is going to create a lot of adverse effects for all those countries involved in this OBOR project, in particular about Pakistan. Now, since there is another story that Lieutenant General Asim Bajwa, who was earlier the commander of the Southern Command, Pakistan Army, and he was the Corps Commander Quetta, and earlier than that, we all know that he's also served as the DG ISPR, has been appointed as the main man, the top man for this CPEC Authority, and he's going to look after all the affairs. Now, this was actually approved by the Cabinet Division, because this particular area comes under that Cabinet Ministry, and primarily they're looking after the affairs there. Now, since we have also learned that there are about 9 military battalions looking after the CPEC, all the way from Kashgar down to Gwadar. And since we went through those internal issues and the external issues, rather, let me call those external threats and internal threats, whether you talk about the Uzbekistan Islamic movement for that matter, or you talk about other such extremist elements present in that region, how to counter those, and on top, the Islamization, let me not phrase it in the wrong way, but this concept, Islamophobia or whatever you may call it, where certain sect of the religion is targeted there in that part of the world, especially when I talk about Gilgit and Baltistan. And not only there, but also certain incidents took place in the province of Sindh on the coastal highway. So that is of prime concern. Then when we look at the external threats, for example, whether it's coming from India, how to sabotage this project, or indirect threats where they are saying that, well, Americans have a better model for Pakistan as compared to Chinese, but since Pakistan has decided one thing, and we are sticking to it. On the other hand, regarding the ports in Dubai or the port in Chabahar for that matter, though the claim is that this is going to complement the Gwadar port, but practically speaking, on an honest note, this is going to be in competition. That's how it is. A lot of development has already taken place. The setup for the repair of the ships, that is some very important areas, I would say, where the government is really working hard. A lot of Chinese investment is still pouring in. The second phase of CPEC has started. Now about the security and about the overall well-being of this project. And since this is going to continue till 2030, and maybe obviously more projects are going to come in, but still this is considered to be the flagship program of the entire project. I'm talking about CPEC in particular. China has always looked after Pakistan, especially whenever we needed them, whether in terms of economy or whether we talk about in terms of some other diplomatic support. They've always stood by Pakistan. And even on this particular case, they are with us. Certain rumors were spread, for example, that look what happened in Sri Lanka, or for that matter, what happened in Kenya, that leasing out is generally a concept that wherever Chinese are investing, at the end of the day, those countries will not be able to pay them back and they'll take over. Maybe that is going to be a hostile takeover. But how much reality is in there, and what should be the course which Pakistan as a country needs to adopt, especially any other government? Currently, it's the PTI's government. Previously, it was PMLN, and earlier than that, it was Pakistan People's Party. But everybody supported this project. Our foreign policy, no matter what, whosoever is in the power, is always very, very inclined towards China, and that is what the significance of our foreign policy is. Let me read out two very interesting shares. One is from the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. He said that Pakistan has rejected, look at the word, Pakistan has rejected United States Assistant Secretary Alice Wells' recent comments on CPEC. We do not think that the burden of CPEC will increase our debt burden. Pakistan's total debt burden is $74 billion, of which CPEC is 4.9 billion. The Chinese Foreign Ministry, again, issued a very interesting statement, rather two statements, saying that China says United States Assistant Secretary Alice Wells' recent comments on CPEC is mere repetition of old slanders against China, the CPEC and the BRI. Then they say that China puts Pakistani people's interest first, and CPEC's projects had led to creation of employment for the locals and improvement in transportation and power infrastructure. CPEC projects had also contributed one to 2% to Pakistan's economic growth. Now, this was stated by the Chinese. Now, interestingly, these are very strong statements, and it actually tells you that what sort of a direction Pakistan and China have agreed upon to adopt. To talk about this, let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio, on my right is Dr. Nazir Mahmood Saab, senior columnist, senior journalist. Sir, thank you very much. We have with us Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti Saab, who's a senior defense analyst. Sir, thank you very much. And we have with us Asif Durrani Saab. Ambassador Saab needs no introduction. He's a senior diplomat, sir. Thank you very much. Now, Nazir Saab, first of all, sir, let's comment on the statement coming from none other than Miss Alice Wells. And she's been trying her level best to make sure that there should be some sort of confusion that should prevail in the minds of the Pakistani people, primarily about CPEC, because we were told that this is going to be a game changer, and maybe after 15 or 20 years, things would be very different for Pakistan. The more Chinese interest is going to have in this part of the country, obviously the threat, the imminent threat from the western or from the eastern border, that also gets reduced. So your take, sir.
Well, I mean, first we need to see who's saying it and what is being said. Alice Wells has a certain background from Jordan also. She was American ambassador in Jordan, and there also she was not liked by the Jordanian government, and in fact King Abdullah of Jordan specifically requested Obama to remove her from the post, which Obama didn't listen to, but Trump did. So it is a fact that she was removed from her ambassadorial post because she was indiscreet and she was having tense relationship with the Jordanian government also. So what that shows? That shows that she has been injudicious in her remarks, indiscreet commentary, uncalled for comments she has been doing. And that is not only about Pakistan, she did it in Jordan also. So that's what her background is. Though she is highly qualified, career diplomat, she knows Russian, Arabic, even smattering of Urdu and Hindi also, but she has been indiscreet. This is one. Now let's see what she actually said. She has specifically targeted. Generally, she talked about BRI, Belt and Road, but she specifically targeted Pakistan. And her observations that she made, she said, number one, she talked about debt trap that you just mentioned, and secondly, she pointed out this mainline 1 ML1 project, and she, in fact, she quoted the amount also, that initially the cost was estimated to be 8 billion, and then our railway minister Sheikh Rashid negotiated and said that he would bring it down to 6 billion, yes, and then ultimately it was 9 billion. So these were the things that she said. But overall, if you look at her comment, there was nothing concrete that she was offering. It was just simple criticism and caution and presenting American model. And what, I mean, it's ridiculous what American model she presented. I mean, I read her whole entire text of that. She said that American model is based on private investment. We don't believe in government intervention in investment, while Chinese model is government led, which is true. But what private led model she talked about, she specifically mentioned that American multinational companies are also investing in Pakistan. For example, Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola and Uber, yes, are investing. Yes, I was surprised to see these words. I mean, where we are talking about $60 billion investment in infrastructure, industry, energy.
And you're mentioning about this much.
And she's talking about Pepsi Cola and Uber and Coca-Cola investing in Pakistan $1.3 billion. I mean, is it a joke? So
not even comparable.
Not even comparable. Not only in terms of the amount that she talked about, but I mean, consumer goods you drink and how much Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola are going to contribute to Pakistan's development.
Eventually, they end up taking back that kind of money, sir. Yes. Nestle takes away more than $1 billion every year.
Yes. So overall, her comments were uncalled for, but luckily, and I'm happy that, you know, the reaction, some of it you read right now, also the reaction not only from our Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, but even our Senate Foreign Affairs Committee led by Senator Mushahid Hussain. They also issued a very good statement. Chinese ambassador also clarified the issue, and Chinese Foreign Ministry also came up. So from four different quarters, very strong responses have come out. And what they have clarified? They have clarified, first of all, that the debt they are talking about is the interest rate they are going to charge, it's no more than 2%. This is an important point, just 2%, and that is also flexible
Long term.
in long term.
Yeah.
And they are also not going to press it. This is very clear from Chinese ministry's statement that if we see that Pakistan's economic condition is not well, we are not going to press for immediate repayment, which is a very good gesture.
A lot of relaxation is in there.
Relaxation. So
Yes.
they clarified, so this was one objection about debt trap, they clarified that. Second objection was that most of the jobs were going to Chinese people. Now, if you look at the CPEC website also, they have mentioned that 51,000 jobs are already created and 48,000 are for Pakistani people. So what that shows, I mean, this perception which is being created that all the jobs are going to Chinese people, this perception is not true. Though a couple of things she talked about deserve our attention also. For example, she stressed about more transparency, which is needed. So the more transparent you make it, the better it is. So this was something that we need to be when Lieutenant General retired Asim Bajwa is going to take over. So I would stress that when he takes over, he should try to make it as transparent as possible, so that such objections.
And I'm sure he's going to do that. Interestingly, there was very interesting report also that even if you remember, sir, few months ago when there was this issue of FATF, even then they were asking us about the details of CPEC, which has got nothing to do with it. So there's a lot of pressure, sir, coming on from Pakistan, and they say, well, our model is better than the Chinese model, and why aren't Pakistan tilted towards USA the way we have been all these years? But now, sir, things have changed, alignments have changed. We are not saying that we have totally reversed our foreign policy as far as USA is concerned. But, sir, we are looking towards more revenues, more options, more capitals, I would say. And in this particular regard, sir, CPEC or OBOR is a part of their constitution, the Chinese constitution. So this is something they're totally dependent on. Pakistan is a very, very important strategic partner. And I'm sure the kind of misperceptions that the Western media is creating about CPEC, they will fade away sooner. I hope so. Your take.
Well, you see, while we talk about as to what is being said and who's saying it, I'll just allude to as to why is it being said. Well, we know there is a trade war between China and USA already on. And also at the global level, at the global geopolitical or geostrategic level, there is now a visible contest between the two as to who would eventually come out as the the leading economy or leading power in the world in the years to come. And the Americans are apparently already losing the battle. And any such attempt by any American government functionary would be essentially to check or to impede any such project or programs which the Chinese government have launched, because CPEC or OBOR, as and when it takes gains traction, it starts to give out its dividends. It is more than evident that first of all it's going to bring socio-economic well-being to the people living in Western China. That is what it is being focused on. Then of course it's going to give rise to China's geopolitical and geostrategic relevance or importance or ascendancy within the world. And of course it's going to add to Chinese economy. And besides that, it's going to make the region prosperous. And when the region becomes prosperous, there will be little space left for extra regional powers like the US to be of any consequence here, which of course is quite to the detriment of what the Americans are thinking today, because if they would hate to be irrelevant over here, they would hate to lose importance, lose significance, lose leverage over the local governments. And when these projects take shape and they start to give out their dividends, that is what is going to happen. So I think all these attempts are directed in that direction, that they would like to slow it down, impede it, or in their dream they would want to have them dismantled. So that is why they continue to create fears in the recipient governments, like in the case of Pakistan, that
So creating such fears, is that also a part of the fifth generation warfare, if I may ask?
Certainly, certainly, because they're going to create doubts, they're going to create apprehensions, inhibitions in the minds of the local population, the mind of local planners, thinkers, or people who are involved in this, and even the minds of the governments. So I think
And
this
that is the reason that the clarification is coming from the Chinese ambassador or the foreign minister of Pakistan, for that matter.
absolutely.
Now, Ambassador, I'll just read out a statement which I had earlier marked. Now, this is here. It says, now, diplomat, that Beijing would profit from CPEC only, whereas all those other countries, for example, Pakistan, they say that the Pakistani, whereas I'll be looking at the current economic situation and the current economic model and the kind of challenges which we are facing at the moment, Pakistan doesn't have that economic strength and that economic backbone at the moment to survive that kind of a pressure. So your take on that?
I think Alice Wells has tried to play with the words, and as rightly pointed out by our other worthy panelists. If you go by the statistics, you yourself has said the total debt is $74 billion, out of which the Chinese government loan is around $4.7 billion, and that is not much. One. Secondly, this China-Pakistan economic corridor, in fact, it was enthusiastically pursued by the government of Pakistan.
All the three governments, sir.
Not even General Musharraf, People's Party, then PMLN, and now this government. And it is there's a national ownership of this whole project. So there is a consensus, and it is now. I'm not surprised because Alice Wells's statement comes at a time when the first phase of the project has been completed, which means the infrastructure has been laid. Or as far as railway is concerned, it would be in the coming soon. So infrastructure is the main thing. Second, energy projects have been completed very fast.
Yes.
And these energy
Even faster than the expectations.
Yes. So energy projects, infrastructure projects actually are contributing to Pakistan's economy. You may not have its fruits today, but it is for the long term, one, even for the medium term. When the phase 2 of the projects, when we will have economic zones in operation. And we should not forget that Chinese will be relocating their production lines in these economic zones. And for that, we also need capacity building, because our people are still not geared for those technologies and all that, so they'll be trained. And right now, it is my studies shows that 70,000 jobs have already been created. Pakistanis are in the 70, and in the coming 10 years, it will be 1.24 million jobs which will be created along the route of CPEC. So what Americans are saying, they have not offered any alternate what China has offered.
Even if they do you think we are in a position to consider that? No.
No, it's not the question. It won't be either or. We can welcome the American investment also. And this Gwadar, what we are talking about, so Saudis have come forward. So it is Gwadar plus actually. So Gwadar doesn't.
It's Gwadar plus. Even Iran is a part of that, right?
Yes. So CPEC is just not for Pakistan and China. Other members of the region, they are also welcome. And then BRI initiative is actually, it also look towards India also. And then Central Asia. So it is just not restricted to Pakistan and China, or for that matter, as Alice Wells, she has been quite concerned about the rate of interest given by the commercial banks. About those loans, one, there is a long period of return, and more than that, that's an investment. So in that respect, on the energy projects, yes, they are slightly expensive, but for the current rates. If you recall the IPPs which were installed, then those were quite expensive. But from today's point of view, if you look at it, those are quite cheaper, in fact. Now much
Rates have
expensive
changed, everything has
options have-
changed, pricing has
So-
changed, yes.
So, but for our concern is that where we will be having a takeoff in our industrial sector.
That's the key.
So we should not miss this opportunity. We will not miss this opportunity.
All right. So all as well as far as that is concerned. Now talking about another very important aspect, sir, the external and the internal challenges. External, I mean, includes so many, starting from the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, or you talk about Talibanization, or you talk about religion extremism, or you talk about, for that matter, so many other Islamic I would say organizations which have played a very negative role, sir. On top, India, constantly trying to sabotage this, sir. With the aid, a lot of people believe that with the aid of the Israelis and the Americans even. And on the other hand, sir, when you look at the external, I mean, there are so many of them as well. Now, this particular authority was created. Now, General Bajwa, Salim Bajwa, Asim Salim Bajwa has been appointed as the head of this 9 battalions. So primarily there are challenges on so many multiple fronts, but this is more about security. Let's throw light on that aspect, sir. How important is it and how to go about it?
Well, you talked about both internal and external factors, and that is good, because external factors here probably count even more. And
Yes.
as you rightly pointed out, that there has emerged now, especially after Modi has taken over in India. In fact, he was elected for the second term, Trump in America. So there is a very visible this triangle, troika, working together.
Look at the amendments and the changes they have made in the map of India.
Yes.
Especially in the northern side. So
Yes.
that tells the story. That
Yes,
explains everything.
and we see this, newborn bonhomie between Trump and Modi, and Netanyahu has also been visiting. So I think there may be some conspiracy behind. Now, openly they talked about debt trap and economics and finance, but behind the scene there might be some other plannings going on.
Hostile intelligence agencies working against
Yes,
it.
yes.
I'm sure.
I mean, that happens. That happens. So there may be some. So of course, we need to protect this CPEC. So this is an external thing. But in external thing, I must also point out that it is very important for us to, at the same time, trying to establish some better relationship with Afghanistan and with Iran. Ideally with India also, but in India, as long as Modi is there, probably it won't be fruitful. But at least with Afghanistan and Iran, I think we should be moving forward.
So
and
we have
establishing-
definitely tried, and we are doing that. We're working on those lines, aren't we? Look at the visit of the Prime Minister to Iran. Look at the second visit of the Chief of Army Staff to Iran. Prior
Yes.
to that, so many other visits to Afghanistan also.
Yes, we are, but I think we need to do more.
Okay.
So this is number one. And number two, internally, the organizations that you talked about, these are mostly terrorist organizations. And China has also been concerned about this. And I am tempted to mention the Uyghur issue, in Xinjiang. Now, the allegation is that China has detained hundreds of thousands of people and this retraining is going on. I think there is a bit of exaggeration in that. You can't detain hundreds of thousands of people.
This is the report of the Western media. So
Yes.
I mean, the way they're trying to focus on this Hong Kong unrest, for God's sake, nobody
Yes.
talks about what's going on in Kashmir.
But-
they are just reporting Hong Kong that one person died and one was injured. That's the story they've been giving so much time on air, sir.
Yes, so that is highly exaggerated.
Yeah.
The number is highly exaggerated, but what is good about it, that you need some look at Fatah and Sawat. I mean, when our forces did operation there, after that we did have some training given, professional and vocational training, to eliminate or at least reduce this extremist and terrorist thinking in people. Most of these people are without jobs. They complain against the society. They are left unattended. So they need some, gainful employment. And for that, our forces established in Fatah and Sawat some training centers, so that vocational and professional training centers. So if China is doing, there is nothing wrong in it, which is better. I mean, every country, be it China or Pakistan, we need to keep an eye that if our people, unemployed people, uneducated people, unskilled people, if they are getting influenced by extremist thinking, something should be done. Some some professional or vocational training should be given, education should be given, so that they
Get
become
them
clear in their
involved
mind.
in something productive.
Yes. So this aspect should not be neglected, because you can't eliminate terrorism by using further state terrorism, just like India is doing. India is doing wrong. So I mean, in this region, if we want to have these extremist tendencies, which have been there, which are there, so if we want to, if not completely eliminate, but at least reduce these extremist feelings, so that they don't play in the hands of India or Israel or American lobby, they need some training and orientation, and that's where I think we should be focusing. And number two, I think that what is lacking in CPEC, in CPEC there are three major components: energy, infrastructure, and industry, right? But what is missing here for the common people: health, education, water, sanitation. These are common problems which do not require $60 billion. They require only a couple of $1 billion, and you can do a lot in that. So when I look at CPEC documents, what I notice is this major concern of people. People are more interested in, as I mentioned, health, education, water, sanitation. These are the things. So to make this CPEC more people friendly, so to say, and to counter the allegation that this infrastructure is being built just to support China and help them in transportation of their goods, we need to come up with solid projects. So if
So that they can have a direct impact on the economy.
direct impact.
Yeah?
So
And people
if
see it,
Bajwa
yeah.
is going to take over, what he should do, though I do have some reservations, because if he is looking only at economic security aspect, that is good. But more essentially, it is an economic corridor, economic corridor. So if it is an economic corridor, probably a more, business oriented, economics oriented, finance oriented personality would do much better.
But this
as long as
assignment most
security is
likely which has
concerned-
been assigned to General Asim Bajwa, primarily it's
security.
more about security.
Yes, that's all right. If security is, as far as
I
security
don't
is
think it's
concerned,
just
that is all right.
security, no.
Isn't it, sir?
It's overall.
So when it comes under the
And when
Ministry
you talk
of
about security,
Cabinet
there,
Division.
there have been attacks in the past. So you have to provide the security.
Okay.
Because there are Chinese who are also there, stationed there. So, and more importantly, when Dr. Nazar Sahib is saying, health education is the responsibility of the government of Pakistan. China-Pakistan economic corridor is meant for these three things, which is industrialization, which will ultimately help you in boosting your economy.
Correct.
And then when you talk about energy, if you are energy deficient, then your industry cannot move. So energy is sine qua non for your industry, industrial growth. And that's when. And
All
infrastructure, unless you have infrastructure, so these are interlinked, interlocking, issues which have to be addressed, and which will have the trickle-down effect would be on your overall economy, the health of your economy, and then you can also look after the socio-economic elements of your society. So those economic, educational and health issues, that in any case, any government has to fulfill those responsibilities.
All right. Now,
Sorry for this.
No problems. Avim Sahab, when we talk about the socio-economic transition that is taking place in the region, obviously poor people, areas which were not properly taken care of, now they'll see the development, they'll see the infrastructure. Just like the difference between the GT road and the motorway. When motorway was formed, we were like, why on this route? Yeah. But now look at what has happened. But this took time, almost, if not
Correct.
more, around 2 decades. Within Pakistan, where there was no security threat. Over there is. So you're not looking at immediate, benefit of that project coming into. But in the long run, for sure. Now, my question is, sir, recently I read 2 very interesting articles. One was about the economic downfall because of the banking system of China, and they are looking at somewhere around 40 trillion, T for trillion dollars. And they have said that almost during the last few months, maybe 3 to 4 months, 3 of the major banks, they have been so-called nationalized, and 72 billion grant was given to one, $72 billion. So primarily to look after the affairs. But a lot of people do believe, and this is what the Western media is reporting, that the current growth rate is going to get hampered at some stage. The overall outlook of the Chinese economy might not be especially after this trade war between the US and the Chinese. Do you see the Chinese economy slowing down, and if so, this entire project might get affected at some stage, sir?
No, certainly not. But before I allude to this, let me just refer to another component of CPEC, and that is agriculture. And we all know that agriculture essentially is the backbone of Pakistan's economy. A very great percentage of our people are engaged in agriculture. And a very vital aspect in CPEC is to improve the productivity, agriculture productivity, in which you reduce the amount and the cost of inputs, and you enhance the yields, and you bring in more areas under cultivation. And as a result, there is a lot more that gets produced in this sector. And you can have different crops, you can have different maybe agriculture projects like fruits and vegetables and other such things, and not only for domestic consumption but also for export, which will add to our economy, plus it will add to more jobs within the country. Coming to Chinese economy and its outlook and its ability to continue to support such a project, I think Chinese economy still has that depth, and while the Europeans or the American would continue to create these doubts and fears in the minds of the rest of the world, including countries like Pakistan who are recipient of such project from China, that the outlook is not so promising, and hence they should be careful and mindful, and then they should not go wholehearted in this project with the Chinese. In fact, they are trying to impose a caution on not only on these countries but also on the Chinese, which is through creating doubts. But the fact remains that the Chinese economy is, I think, deep enough, strong enough to support such a project. They have huge reserves, and a project
But
of
they
this
have
nature.
reserves, but sir, at the same time, a lot of people believe, a lot of analysts, economic, I would say, advisors, they believe that the Chinese portfolio in various areas, I mean, they have overstretched it, and secondly, when you look at it from that particular perspective, sir, it's not only about the overstretching, but the return. It's so slow because of various reasons, as I earlier mentioned about the trade war, and then the kind of commitment coming in from the other countries. Because Chinese at the moment are just investing and investing, and such fears do result in issues, sir. I mean,
well, you see, let's talk of the trade war. I think the Americans have now realized that of the two, the party that is going to lose in a trade war is the US itself. And they are already in the process of resolving it and settling it. And if anything, through this settlement, through this resolution, while the Americans would of course gain something, but the Chinese remain the bigger beneficiary. So that alone is something which is going to bring a better outlook for Chinese economy. And I think CPEC is directly connected with China. It's not so far away from Chinese mainland. And if anything, the dividends of this project are going to be felt far more earlier than any other product that China has invested in the world over, just because its proximity to the energy reserves or energy resources in the region, and its connectivity to western region of China, which needs that energy, plus that they need their own people living over there to be gainfully engaged, because right now Chinese living in western China have to migrate to eastern China, where all the industry and development is taking place. So
that also on the coastal side also.
yes, so the Chinese need this probably more than what Pakistan needs. So I think this is a project with the Chinese would be treating it with a higher priority, and if God forbid there is any downturn in Chinese economy, I think this would be the last project to be hit by that downturn as far as Chinese.
But things will improve in the long run.
Certainly.
Now, sir, another important area, and that is about, do you believe, sir, by just I won't use the word sabotage, but putting pressure, developing more political, diplomatic sort of an engagement on China from the American, from the Western, let's put it this way, sir, do you think that can actually slow down the economic growth rate of China? Because if there is a war, if there is a trade war, I mean, this is the battleground basically, totally prepared for it. Do you think the Americans will be able to do that, sir?
Don't think so, because in the trade war, if Americans go very strict. In fact, half of their industry would go bankrupt because they are now in China based. So it would be suicidal for the American economy. And America should not forget that it owes China almost $2.5 trillion. So, so the situation is not in favor of the United States. They may create these kind of, for CPEC, the kind of scare they have tried to spread, it has been outrightly rejected both by China and Pakistan, which shows the result that it will happen. So as far as sabotage theory is concerned, they have tried, but they know that they have not succeeded. And more importantly, Americans will be missing the bus as far as Pakistan's development is concerned.
Do you think they have already missed it?
Well, no, I think we still have the door open because our foreign
But sir,
policy.
I mean, on what grounds? We are no more the strategic partners. We are no more the
No, but-
transactional partners
No,
even.
no, the question is.
I mean,
they
their
have the-
inclination is totally towards India. What are we getting out of it?
It's not with regard to. Please also look at your own capacity. That is very important. The reason Chinese industries are not being relocated to Pakistan is our capacity problem.
Do you think they could have been
Yes.
here now, by now, sir, if things
Yes,
were right?
yes, yes. So this
Could
is
have been
yeah.
actually a part of our own economic
And
prosperity.
we should also look at from other angle that it started from 2013 onwards, the actual work. While port was there, but the CPEC itself, it's now only 6 years, and first phase has been almost completed. And despite all pitfalls, capacity problems, we have a very acute shortage of
Human resource?
human resource.
Skilled human resource.
Skilled human
Of course,
resource, that is
human resource.
primarily a
When we
problem,
say
sir.
human resource, then it's not the unskilled. So it is. We have to focus on that, and that's the key. That's the reason being that our labor is far cheaper than China's. So Chinese.
So far cheaper, but not at all productive as compared to them. No, that's
So
the thing.
fine.
So instead
you
of
have-
keeping 10 people, we should
So
prefer
this
to
is
have
what
one Chinese who will be working for
So
those.
precisely, the government will have to focus on training the people and train people just not for.
And this is going to be an ongoing process.
It has
because
to
this CPAC is an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
So
So
we're looking
it-
at 40, 46 and maybe 60 billion. Maybe you never know. In another 20, 25 years down the line could go up to 100 billion.
And
maybe
one
more
thing
than
this
that.
CPEC which will generate, right now Chinese trade with the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, is around $150 billion.
It's going to go through this area.
Already it is, not true, but with CPEC, it will add another $150 billion, which means
Almost the size of the economy of Pakistan every year you're talking about. Just
yes,
imagine.
so it will be a $300 billion trade with the MENA region. And this 150 would mostly be through Pakistan. And Chinese would be saving $25 billion only on transportation by using the CPEC route. And don't forget about the transit fee, which will be.
Primarily, they'll end up recovering within 3 years.
So,
Yeah, it's a win-win situation for them.
So here there's no dismal situation.
All right. So closing remarks from you, Dr. Saab.
Closing remarks, I will reiterate what I said, and Honorable Ambassador also stressed upon that: capacity building and education. And I would add that without these 2-3 things, health and education, I mean, if you don't focus on this infrastructure will go nowhere unless you have healthy people, both mentally and physically, who can contribute to economy. These roads and these things, they are not going to help. So my concluding remark is that focus on health and education of people so that we can get the benefit of CPEC.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. It was a pleasure having you. ABM Saab, and thank you so much, Ambassador. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.